Hey everyone, we're looking at our database program, and what we're going to be doing is adding a CVS export function in, because as the question goes, sometimes there's nothing new under the sun, and if you find that perfect class you might like to use in your program but the documentation might be somewhat lacking, so what do you do? Well, that's what we're going to be looking at today. What to do when there isn't much documentation to look at. So what I would like to point out first of all though is that there is a lot of functionality that is built into Free Pascal, and I could easily show you this by going into the components folder underneath Lazarus, and you can see just how many there are, and that's without installing anything. If you go into the online package manager as another place, and you can get lots of things you can access online as well. So a lot of the so while there is a lot of functionality that comes with Free Pascal and ready for production use, sometimes we'll find that the documentation is minimal, and that is the case when it comes to the CVS export function. I would also like to point out though that the Free Pascal and all these components are developed by volunteers, and time is one thing that not everyone has on their hands to do. So what this does mean though is as a developer you might have to read the source code, look for examples, or do a little bit of trial and error to work out how to use a library or a component or whatever you might be using. So here we're going to be looking at the CVS exporter, and it's a component that comes as part of the LazDB export package. And as far as an example is concerned, you can see that we have a form, or in this case here I should say a frame, where we have the exporter, a save dialog, and a save button clicked. So when they click on the save button, a save dialog is opened, then the exporter is executed, and before you execute it you specify the file name and the data set to use. So that's a start. So now we have to find out about what is this CVS exporter, where does it live, and so on. So why don't we see whether we can find that. No, that's just where I was. What about this one here? Here we go. So here we can see the CVS exporter class, and you can see it's got a bunch of properties. And if we were to, let's just say, go up to the custom exporter, and we were to look at maybe, well, let's look at that function there or procedure as an example. There is little there that tells me about the function. So what this now means is that I have to go to the actual source code to work out how some of these functions work. So here we have the exporter class here. I'm going to just close a couple of these other ones down so we don't confuse myself, if not you. And it inherits from this CVS exporter. And let's just say I want to look at what this thing here does. Restore, let's see whether we can find that one. Okay, restore position is a Boolean. Okay, that doesn't tell me much either. So what I have to do now is to see what happens when, if I want to have my export function position the cursor back, or appears to not move from the current row, once the operation is complete. Now if we use the example code from the website, then that's what we have here. And if we were to run this, and I'm going to just chuck it on a random record here. We'll hit the export. We get a save dialog happening, and we'll go into our temp folder somewhere here. And we'll call this one list 10. And it's finished, and you can see now that my cursor is on the last row. So to have it not leave the cursor on the last row, we have to work out, well, how can I keep it, or keep the cursor where it was when the record ends? Well, the answer here is to, we need to tell it to restore the position. And when we do tell it to do that, let's see what the execute function will do here. Okay, if not, do data set. So what's going to happen here is going to check whether, whether the data set is in browse mode. It disables the controls, and by disabling the controls, by the way, means that it's not going to update the screen every time it moves from record to record. It gets a bookmark of where it's currently at, and here basically, if we are in the middle, then it basically takes to the first record here. And here at the very end, well, here it basically is going to do all the export stuff, and at the end we tell it if it wants to restore the position, then it puts it back before re-enabling the controls. So knowing it's doing all of that means that all we need to do here is to set the position, and we don't need to enable controls ourselves either. So what we're going to do now is to rerun this program now, having put in the restore position. So now we are there, and this time we're going to call this one list 11. So that's done also, and what we're going to look at now is what's in that file that we just exported. So the first thing you can see, well, one of the most obvious things that we can see here is that while my first field here is rego number, I've got a permit year and some vehicle information and color. Here you can see every field that is coming back in the data set, and this perhaps is not what you would want to see or provide to another function of user or whatever else. So we might want to restrict what the user gets, and so now we need to work out, well, how can I restrict the fields that are exported? And also, when you look at this part here, really what you'd be wanting to do when you are running a query to display in a grid to a user would be to only get the information from the database that you actually want. So these fields here are unnecessary. What we might do here, I'm just going to copy all of these fields here, and we're going to modify our query at the end of this video here. So now what we want to do is to be able to tell the export function what fields do we want to export here. So we now have to go back to the exporter class, and luckily we were able to see that there is an export fields property that we can use, and export fields is another class. It's a collection of fields, and we can add them by name. Now when the exporter function runs, so we'll have to look at that just when we look at that one, you can see here that it's going to call, I think it's this one here, bind fields function, and this function here basically controls which fields are being exported here. So if I specify fields to export, then it will only use the fields that I tell it to here. If there are no export fields, then you're going to get all the fields, which is what you saw in the example or in the example output files provided by the program. Now in playing around with the code here, we can just say, if we just want to do the rego field alone, then I just need to add that one there, add that line in if I wanted to have another field coming out. So what would be another field that I have? Let's just go back to the list again, and let's go for that column there. And it doesn't matter, by the way, whether you specify the export fields, by the way, before or after you specify the data set, because it's only going to match the export fields to the data set during the execute method or property. So now we will restart our program again, having made that change. So let's just build it. Hit the run button again, and now we'll do an export, and this time we will call it list 12. That's done. Go back into here. And now you've got two columns being output only. Now the question is going to be, well, what happens when if I've got a field that has a comma in it, like you may have an address field, and in which case typically you would want to have those particular fields surrounded by double quotes. Well, let's just cancel that one, close that one, close that one, and come back to here. Well, now we are stuck in a position where we need to go back and then look at this class here to see how we can set those properties here. So because I can see that there is a quote chart, but I don't know how it gets used. So I'm going to be searching for a comma here, see if it does that one. Append row, do data row, and append cell, append field. Need leading delimiter. CVS builder. How does it know whether it wants that? Well, that's going to be false and that's going to be true. Cell value. Maybe that's not it. Quote CSV string, what's that going to do? white space, value 1 in white space, need quotation. Okay. White space chars. Okay. I might look at this one in a separate, hang on, that in special chars. What are special chars here? Okay, there we go. Okay, so then if it's none of those ones, then it will actually look in here. So let's look at that a little bit more closely, shall we? Okay, that'll be the delimiter. And what's my delimiter normally here? A comma. Okay, so that looks like it would handle it already. Okay, so we did say that we were going to modify that query, so let's just get that done now. And to do that, I'm going to have to find, I thought I had fixed that up over here, but maybe I didn't. Let's go back into the project manager. View program source at least, go into the data module here, find our SQL statement here, and we can then just paste all of that. And just to make this look nice, hit OK there. Okay. Now, because I've taken out some of these fields here, this is going to crash, and I can show that right pretty easily right now, actually. So what we can do here to make this, we can write a little utility function for ourselves. So we're at line there, and so that's been built again now. Run the program. It's should display as a rows. We don't get any errors about fields not found when trying to make them invisible. And if we run that export function again, well, actually we have specified a couple of rows, so we want to turn that off now. And this time when we open it, you can see here we've got a much smaller set of fields, and the other fields are no longer present. And by the way, it is preferable to, in a select query, to only specify the fields that you actually need or are actually using. So if we do go back to my notes here now, basically what I would like to say is that Free Pascal is largely volunteer-driven community, and that sometimes our code, will come before documentation. But it is not a bad thing to actually have to look at the code to see how things work, and we can learn from that, and that is also a valuable skill. On the other side though, we can say that if you do use or work out how to use a component such as the CVS exporter, then what you could do is to share your experience either in a blog post. You could update the documentation, provide a code example of how to use it, and that helps everyone. And documentation then is something that we can all contribute to. And with a little digging, we can actually work at how we can use that component. That's about it for this video. In the next one, we'll probably look at how can we sort the grid, and are there any components that could help us there. And until next time, happy coding, and I'll see you then, and bye.